Hey guys, this is Mike Biddinger. I'm one of the photographers here at TNF Camera. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a smoke effect in water using paint or ink. Okay, so some of the non-photographic materials that you're going to need for this are your ink or your paint that you're going to be putting into the water to create your effect, a fish tank to hold the water. If you don't have a fish tank, then a large glass vase or any other large glass container will work. Clamps, these come in handy for holding any props in the water in place. Syringes work best for controlling the flow of the ink or the paint as you introduce it into the water. Cups and utensils for mixing and diluting your pigments. And this, if you don't have something like this or a ruler, anything with a pattern that you can stick into the water will help you focus your camera. Okay. Now for photographic equipment, you're going to want to make sure that obviously you have a camera and either a cable release. If you don't have a cable release, you can use the 2-second or 10-second timer on your camera. You want to make sure you have a good sturdy tripod. For lighting, we're going to be using 2 lights. You can either use speed lights. I'm going to be using the Gikoto GT200s, one with the dome diffuser, and the other is going to be lighting from the back of the fish tank using a 24 by 24 inch softbox to create a bright white background. Also to help with shadows or covering up any dark spots, we're using white foam. If you have foam core or a white reflector, that'll work just fine too. And also you want to make sure that you have a trigger that will fire both of your lights. As you're setting up your shot, you can see here that I have my camera set on the tripod already. I'm using a 100mm macro lens, which is going to get in closer to focus on all the little details that the pigment's going to make in the water. I have my trigger set and I have my cable release here. Got the camera set up in portrait orientation because we're going to be introducing our pigments from the top. So I want as much vertical frame to work with to get that entire, as much of that effect in the frame as I can. Next on this side I have one of my speed lights, one of my GT200s set up. I have it set to where it's going to be at about a 45-degree angle to my left, or camera left, of the fish tank, and I have it on the dome diffusion. This is going to basically fill in any shadows that are going to be cast by the backlight that I'll show you in just a minute. For my backlight, I'm going to be using my second speed light with the 24 by 24 inch Godox collapsible softbox. This is going to serve to not only light the subject, but also to give me a bright white back. I'm also going to be using our pieces of foam directly behind the fish tank to make sure that there's no black that shows up on the bottom. Once you've got your camera and your lights set, you need to set your exposure for the shot. So you're going to need, if you don't already have one, it would be useful to go out and get yourself an exposure meter. I know that I want to be shooting at about a 200th of a second, so that I freeze the motion but I still get these nice billowy clouds in the water. And I'm going to have my ISO set at 50. 100 will work, or 200, whatever you want to set at, that's up to you. And I want to set the power on my lights to be about f8 for my aperture, for my exposure, so that I have most of what I'm going to be shooting is going to be in focus. So to do that, I've got my backlight, because I want it to be a bright white background. I have it set at about 1/4 power right now. And since my front light here is just going to be filling in shadows, I'm going to start with it at 1/32 power. I'm going to set my meter about where the center of my fish tank is going to be sitting, and then I test fire my lights, and it tells me that I need to be at F8. So I'm pretty well set. It may take some adjustment and some trial and error on your part, much more so if you don't have a light meter or an exposure meter at home, because then you're gonna have to take a lot of test shots with and without the fish tank to get your exposure set. Okay, so now that we have our exposure set, it's time to build our scene and get our props set and get our focus the way that we want it. So the first thing I've got is I have my cherry that I'm going to be using as my focal point stuck to a plastic fork, and then I've got that suspended in the water using 2 of the clips. From there, I'm going to use the cherry as my focusing point. Once I have my focus set, I'm going to take a test shot. It looks the way that I want it, and from here we're going to take whatever paint we're going to be using. I need more of a tomato color, so I'm using orange acrylic paint, and I'm mixing that with some cherry red India ink, and then I've diluted it with water to about the consistency that I want. This is going to take some trial and error to get the effect that you want. This is an important time to note that every time you introduce paint into the water and take some shots, before you take new shots, you're going to have to dump out the water, clean the tank, and reset your scene again. So this is a tedious process. So make sure you've got some extra time to do this when you start it. Okay. The other thing to note is that I am using one of my syringes for the paint. You can use the eyedroppers that come with the India ink, but if you're using just straight ink, as soon as you put it into the water, it starts to bleed out. So we use the syringe for better control, and we use the acrylic paint diluted just a little bit, so that we still get the smoky flow that we want, but it doesn't just start bleeding out all over the place. So now I'm going to inject the paint into the water behind the cherry and take some shots to see if I get the effect that I want. Okay, so now that we have our shot framed, everything is set and ready to go. I've got my paint, ink, and water mixture in the syringe. I'm going to come in behind the tomato and get this set just behind the prongs, and then I'm going to gently start injecting into the water. Taking a lot of extra shots here just so I don't miss any possible good shot, because it is such a tedious process. So when you're doing this, you are going to end up with, unless you're really lucky, you're going to end up with a lot of shots to go through for your post-processing. So now that I've got that done, let's take a look and see what we got. Now that I've taken my shots and I've got a good deal of images to choose from, I'm going to take a look, and it's important to note here that because you've taken so many images, it's probably a good idea to review and make note of the file numbers that you want to post-process, just so you're not pulling all of those extra images into Lightroom or whatever editing software that you use, and bogging down your workflow. So right off the bat, I'm looking at image number 150, and I'm going to cycle through and see if there's any that I like better. But other than that, I think I've got the shots that I really want for this one. The other thing that you can do, you don't necessarily have to use a prop in the water. It's really nice to make it look like that fruit or vegetable is dissolving. It's a really cool effect. But you can also do some really fun abstract work with different colored backgrounds. You can use a mixture of ink and paint like we did. You can use just pure ink. It's important though that you remember, as you're using acrylic paints or anything that is thicker or heavier than water, that you're going to have to dilute it a little bit at least, just so that it flows properly and doesn't just sink to the bottom. All right guys, well, as we're wrapping it up on our end here, it's time for you guys to take over. Remember, just get creative, and if you have any questions or you just want to share your results, feel free. We're always here for you. Thank you.